Welcome, everyone, to episode 23 of our Magicians Without Borders conversations. Today is our first mailbag episode, so we will be answering your questions. So please send us your questions. So we would love to hear them so we can answer them here on the show. And before we start, I just wanted to make sure that you guys know of our corporate Magic for Virtual Events service. You can find this on corporate.magicianswithoutborders.com. And what it is really is a service for entertainment for remote companies or virtual events. So if you work at a remote company, or right now because of the pandemic you cannot go to your office and you are having regular online meetings and you want to make them different, you want them to be more engaging, more fun, more interactive, we can definitely do that and help you. We've done this for some great teams, and we would love to have you. So I just wanted to show you a little promo video of what this is like. That's it. And we've been fortunate enough to do this a show for many great companies. And it's something that's very interesting because we are joined by our students. So kids from the slums of Colombia are doing this show with us, with Tom, Verner, and me. And it's wonderful to see that these kids can contribute to their families during this, connected economy from the slums in their house without exposing themselves. And it's just a wonderful experience. People that have gone through this process with us, this corporate magic events, they grade us 9.4 out of 10. And we've been fortunate enough to do it for great companies. And last year, we did over 100 shows of this kind virtually. And we would love to have you. So here's a little bit of an explanation of how it works. Hello, my name is Carlos López from Magicians Without Borders, and this is where we create our virtual magic show. We would love to have you. We have multiple cameras where we can see magic different ways, even one for close-up. Let me take you there, and here you can see magic that's going to happen very, very close in front of your screen, and we would love to have you here with us. We've done this show over the last year for great companies like Waymo, YouTube, Google, and we would love to have you. We can deliver this show via Zoom, via Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, or WebEx, or any other communication platform. Looking forward to seeing you at the show. Bye-bye. Great, that's awesome. So remember, visit corporate.magicianswithoutborders.com. And now, welcome to our mailbag episode. Today, we will be answering questions that you have sent us to our email podcast at magicianswithoutborders.com, or tweet it to us at magicianswb, or in your comments in Facebook or YouTube. So remember, if you're here with us live, I'm just going to comment here just saying hello all to people that are joining us. Please send us your questions and we will bring them up and we will answer them. So to help me answer those questions, as always, here is Tom Verner. How are you, Tom?
I'm feeling terrific, Carlos. I love that new promo for the corporate shows. That's really, really nice. Um,
Awesome. Yes, yes.
yeah.
And you know what? We got this because set up because what do we have after we're done with this, Tom?
Well, we before this and after this conversation,
Mhm, yes.
the Google Corporation is having a big 3-day global summit, and this afternoon around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, we did a show for. I'm pretty sure the folks who are in North and South America and uh, Western Europe, and it was fantastic. It was the last event of this 3-day summit, so they saved us for the very, very last cleanup, wonderful position, and we got so many comments from them, so many comments on the chat. They just really loved it. And then tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we're doing a show for the Asia Pacific group of Google employees who have been participating in this 3-day global summit. So it's amazing how these corporate shows are starting to take off. And Carlos did a wonderful, inspirational talk before the show. And I'm going to try to do one as good as that tonight before the
It's gonna be
almost
awesome.
midnight show. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's
It's
gonna
great.
be awesome. Yeah, it's close to midnight, but we're happy to do it. And so, Tom, let's get into this. So, the idea is that we're going to get some questions that we have had. And I'm also going to say this in Spanish. Entonces, los que nos están escuchando en español y están ahí con nosotros en vivo en YouTube, en Facebook o en Twitch, si quieren hacernos una pregunta, hoy es el día donde vamos a responder todas las preguntas que nos hagan. Entonces, por favor, mándenos sus preguntas ahí por el chat para responderlas. So we've been, collecting some questions that people have asked us, and the one that comes up the most is, how did you get into magic? How did Tom get into magic, or how did I get into magic? And we've discussed this, so we also encourage you to go and listen to our first episode, the first one and the second one. We get into detail on how we do it. So I just put the link on the chat there. It's in anchor.fm/mwb-conversations, and you can hear all the episodes that we've done before. So over there, that's there's the answer to that question. So I'll just answer that. Like, how did I get into magic? I remember that I got into magic when I was very little, and actually got a little magic kit of Gustavo Lorgia. Gustavo Lorgia, a great magician here in Colombia, and he does these great magic kits. And I got into it because I was watching magic on TV. I actually saw David Blaine's TV special and some of David Copperfield's big illusions that he did on TV. And that was just, mesmerizing on how we're able to do that. So my parents got me that little magic kit. I started practicing it. And very, very soon, I went to a conference that Gustavo Lorgia was putting up here. And there I met, the late Aldo Colombini, for example, without even knowing that he was there. That was so cool. That I don't know if I've told this story before, but I was I'm just trying to get one card to show you what I was doing. I was sitting at lunch at the conference, right? And I was, with my deck of cards, and I was just trying to figure out how to do, the back and front, right?
Yeah.
And I was sitting by myself. I was 14 years old, I guess, or 13. and I was by myself, trying to figure out how to do this. And then this, big guy, very happy, very with a smile, sat down next to me and said, "Hey, what are you working on?" I was very new to the world of magic. When I say very new, I was very new. I didn't know who he was. He was on the posters and everything. I didn't know who Aldo Colombini was, right? And then he just, took a card and sat down and just said, "Yeah, do this, slide your fingers, open this up, close your hand, open it." And he just, during lunch, sat down with me and taught me how to do the back and front, and then just left. And I was like, "What? Thank you." And then, in the evening, he was, part of the big gala, right? And I'm like, "Oh, that's the guy that sat down next to me on the."
Wow, that's great.
That was so cool.
Yeah, I love his his personality and his stories and the way he performs, and I miss him. I mean, he was a very, very actually the 3 rope trick that I do. Many of the pieces of it are from his Mamma Mia rope routine
Yes.
that I learned from, not from him personally, but from a DVD he put out, Mamma Mia rope routine.
I remember that when he was performing, he said, "Oh, my name is Aldo Colombini." And well, he was here in Bogota, Colombia, right? So he said, "But because I am in Colombia, I am Aldo Colombini. But when I go to Ecuador, I'm Aldo Ecuadorini. And when I go to Peru, I'm Aldo Peruini."
That's exactly his sense of humor. I can imagine him saying that. A similar kind of thing happened to me at a convention. I was already into magic. How I got into magic is a really interesting story, but I would love to just tell this because a very similar thing happened. I was at a International Brotherhood of Magicians convention back in like 1975, and it was in Philadelphia because of the 1976, because it was the bicentennial of or whatever 1776. So they had it in Philadelphia, and I'm sitting in the coffee shop early in the morning. I get up very early, and I was sitting in there, and I was kind of playing with some coins, and this guy comes and sits down at the next table, and we started a conversation. And I didn't know who he was, and it was Slidini. And he said, I said, I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, I'm Slidini." I went, "Oh my goodness, you're Slidini." And so he taught me the basics of the 4 coins through the table and lapping. And the reason I'm telling that story is I have found over the years that magicians are very generous with teaching, especially younger people. And I'm not surprised that Aldo Colombini did that with you that morning.
Yeah, that was such a great moment, such an unexpected, moment of generosity, because I was, I didn't know anybody. I wasn't into the world of magic. I was very, very shy when I was a teenager, and I was just in the corner having my lunch, just by myself. Everybody was in with the groups because they knew everybody. I didn't know anybody, so that was a pretty cool memory to have. That maybe Aldo Colombini saw this, shy, introverted kid by himself at lunch and wanted to just say hi, and it was such a beautiful thing.
That's what I was just going to say. I would love to think that he saw you and you were by yourself, and he just wanted to come over and make you part of the gathering. That's great.
I agree. Okay, so now this question comes from Alejandro Muniz. He is a wonderful magician from Brazil. He's in Campinas. right to the north of Sao Paulo. He's our teacher in Campinas. We have had some trouble with that the education chapter because of COVID and everything. He's just a wonderful thinker of magic. He makes a lot of props that sell worldwide. He has competed on FISM, and he actually made a question that's super deep. It's one, two, three, four words in Spanish. I'm going to say it in Spanish, and then I'm going to try to translate it in English because I think it's very succinct, but it's so deep. So in Spanish, he says, "Con qué mundo soñar?" So that in English would translate something like, "What world should we dream up?" Right? Or with what world should we dream? Right? And I think it's very deep, that question, like what world should we dream up? Right? With what world would you dream, Tom?
What was the second way that you translated it? You had
With what world would you dream of?
What world would you dream of? Well, I'd like to relate this to magic first. That I think, like we were talking, you were talking. I'm going to talk tonight to the Google Global Summit. That magic has a lot to do with the imagination, and I think dreams and dreaming comes from the same place. That is the imagination, that dreams are wildly imaginative. And I think magic, as this Afghan elder in a refugee camp in Afghanistan said, today your magic fed the imaginations of these children, and they'll be thinking and talking about this show for many, many months. So I think magic is related to dreams and imagination. The world that I would dream up, I think, is very much the mission of Magicians Without Borders. A world that is more just and filled with possibilities, especially for people who, in the unjust world that we live in, don't have so many possibilities in their lives. And people have asked Janet and I, doesn't it feel sad being in all those refugee camps you've been in and all those terrible, difficult places where you've done your magic? And the physical suffering, that's difficult. But the real suffering is to see these kids in refugee camps for 10, 15 years and no possibility that they're going to be able to realize their dreams. And so war and whatever that creates these refugee camps closes down the possibilities. And that's what's so amazing today. Tamara and Diego performing for Google around the world from their very limited world that they live in Ciudad Bolivar, in Paradiso, that Magicians Without Borders has opened their world of possibility. So I dream of a world that is more just, and a world that would be more just would have more possibilities for everybody. So that's my response.
I agree, Tom. Very, very, very great answer.
How about yours? Do you have a different one, or is that?
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think that I would try. No, that I would try. No, when I heard this question coming from him, we've had some great discussions about, the state of the world, right? How we see the state of the world, how it's so divided, how politicians want us to, just be there with them 100% and against everything else, or not be with them at all, and how we're manipulated, how we are, how there's interest of powerful people that just take the world in a direction, and the rest just have to follow along because there's no other choice. And how that, makes us feel so uncertain, so vulnerable, so adrift.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it makes it harder to say, hey, let's dream up a better world, right? Let's just try and dream up a better world. And yeah, and I know how sometimes it just feels like too much, like saying, hey, there's just too much going on in the world. There's just too much injustice, too much pain, too much destruction, hunger, all of those things. And we sometimes are paralyzed, or I certainly sometimes feel paralyzed,
Yeah.
saying that there's just nothing that I can do. But when we do this performances, this past few weeks and months with some of our kids in the slums, for a corporate audience via the internet, that does spark some hope on the situation, right? Saying like,
Yeah.
you know, Tamara and Diego were today, performing for 200 people from their house, right? And people were cheering them on from 20 different countries. So that feels like that's like a hopeful future that, or hopeful present that we're creating.
Yeah.
So we should try and dream up a world that's definitely full of hope and full of possibility. That's I agree with on that with you, Tom. So
Yeah.
it's tough, but let's do it. So thank you for the insightful question, Alejandro. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. Thank you,
This one,
Alejandro. Thank you.
this one comes from and this is cool. This is from Edwin Moreno, so one of our students here in Bogota. He said in Spanish, ¿qué ha logrado su organización o proyecto hasta la fecha? So, what has your the project or Magicians Without Borders done to date? But I would change it a little bit, and I would say, what has Magicians Without Borders achieved to date that has, I don't know if this is the right pronunciation, but that has made you the proudest.
Uh-huh.
Let me put it here and tell me if it's well written. Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect.
So, what would you say?
Well, I think we're talking about it. I think it's really impressive, to say we've performed in 45 countries for over 1 million refugee and orphan children, and that's true. But I think the education and empowerment part of our program is something I'm proudest of. That today and over these past couple of months, to perform with Tamara and Diego and to know where they are while they're performing. They have that curtain just like you have behind them, but it covers, as we say in English, a multitude of sins. That it's probably a very, very simple house, very poor, in a very poor neighborhood. I've been in that neighborhood. But that they are feeling so proud of themselves and feeling so wonderful that their parents, many of them have lost their work because of the pandemic, and that these young people are supporting their families is just
Yes. While we get Tom back, because I think we we lost Tom. Because we lost Tom. Oh, Tom, you're back.
Yeah.
Are you back, Tom?
I don't know what happened. Both of us went off my screen.
Yeah, something happened over there, but we got you back. So you were saying that, when you see them perform and
I just feel so proud of them, because they feel so proud of themselves. And I just feel like that is going to, I was sitting in an audience in India, sitting next to a woman who started an amazing organization in Mumbai, India, called Prerana. And it helps children, it helps stop what's called second generation sexual trafficking, and a lot of the women, the sex workers who work in brothels in India, have children, and those children live in the brothels, and they actually sleep under the beds of the women who are working all night on top of them. And this woman is trying to, because 70% of those kids end up in the sex trade. And we've had a program now for almost 10 years with those kids in Prerana. And I was sitting next to Mrs. Patkar, who started this amazing organization 25 years ago. And up on the stage was one of our great students, Priyanka. And she's performing, and it was at a boys' school, a Don Bosco boys' school. And they were giving her a hard time. She was about their same age, and she was holding her own and performing and doing really, really well. And Mrs. Patkar leans over to me and she says, when I see Priyanka performing with such poise and such dignity, I know she will never end up in the sex trade. And I just felt so good about that. And so that's another thing I feel very proudly about. But it's the same thing. It's that we, 7 years into our work, started with those kids in El Salvador. And now we have these groups around the world where I think we're truly changing kids' lives,
I agree. And I would say that for me, it's something similar. I actually have this on tape that I see from time to time. And it was when we were going to go to New York, which it's one of the biggest accomplishments for me.
Phenomenal.
Of taking 6 kids from the slums of Bogota to New York. But I remember that when we were doing this fundraising to get the funds to go, I had this activity with the kids, just saying that we will film everybody just saying what came out from their hearts, that what was the hardest thing that they had to do while they were in the program, right? And some kids started saying, performing in front of hundreds of people, that was very nerve-wracking, losing my stage fright and all that. But I remember one, this was Jefferson. Jefferson, I don't know why it struck me so much, because Jefferson open, very lively, but he said the hardest thing I had to do was to believe in myself. And then he said, but now I do believe in myself, right? So I don't know, for me, that moment of hearing him, and especially him say that, for me was just, I don't know, it made me very, very proud. So I think that would be one for me. So, hey, Edwin, thank you so much for that question. That was.
Can I ask you a question, Carlos?
Go ahead.
I was sitting with my granddaughter, and we were watching this little movie that she wanted us to watch, and I think it was called Heroics or something. And they kept saying that, these heroes, that you have to believe in yourself. What do you mean by that? I'm trying to think, what do I mean by that? What is to believe in yourself? What do you think
So,
Jefferson meant?
uh, so I think that I connected with Jefferson because for me, being young and as a teenager, I had a lot of self doubt. I did not have much self esteem. I was, I had a hard time, or I still do. I still have a hard time, when I say this to my friends. I have a hard time, being alive. For me, being alive and experiencing life, sometimes it's hard. It's just I don't know how to cope with it. It's overwhelming. So, in order to try and do something different and to try and do something that might seem small for some people, for me was just, you know something outrageous, like just standing in front of a crowd and
Yeah.
speaking up, public speaking or something. So, building up enough self-esteem and self-worth to be able to do it for me was very hard to do, right? And I could relate with Jefferson, right. Jefferson was somebody that also needed that, a boost of self-esteem to do it, right? But not just that, but to continue on living, right? To continue on pursuing or awakening dreams that he could pursue, right?
Yeah.
So that for me, I guess that's it. Trying to believe in yourself enough so that you can dream up a future, and go for it, and try to make it happen.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. That's good.
Thank you for the
All right.
question.
Thank you, Jefferson.
Yeah. So if we move forward, this question is from one of my persons that I'm most impressed of. His name is Andres Marquez Lara. He's part of our advisory board. He runs a great company called Prometheus Community, and it's just wonderful. And he just sent me an audio saying, "Hey, I'm very interested in the why. So why you do this, right? Again, in the past episodes we've answered this, but why did you do it? Why do this, and why doing it with magic was interesting, right?" So I guess we've kind of answered that in the past episodes and what we say. But then he went on to saying, "I am very interested in why you think the connection that we see with magic and reality is interesting." And he went on saying, "What do we see the connection, or what do we think about the connection about magic and the reality of the world that has a lot of human suffering in it?"
Mm. Mm.
So, what do you think, or how would you answer that? That question. We're just gonna put it here.
Wow. These are not easy
It's a
questions
question.
tonight. They're really,
No.
really provocative. Very interested in the why. Why do this? I guess he means why even do the work that Magicians Without Borders does? Okay. Why was magic interesting? What is the connection that we see with magic and reality, connection with human suffering in the world? Wow. I'd like to answer that very first part, why? And I'm going to do it in a very personal kind of way. And um,
Go
I,
ahead.
I have been thinking about my mother lately, who died about 6 years ago. She lived to be 98 years old. And when I was little, we lived in a very small coal mining town,
Mhm.
Irish Catholic coal mining town in Western Pennsylvania. And the town we grew up in, the mines had stopped working years before, and other kind of businesses started, and the town was doing okay. But right next door, a little town called Molinar, um, the mine had just been finished, and there were these miners who had no work, and they were very, very poor. And my mom was head of this organization at our church called Christian Mothers. And one of the things that they did was they took food to poor people who had no food, especially maybe around holidays and Christmas and Easter, but also regularly. And I had an older brother who died and a younger sister. There were three of us when we were little. And for some reason, I don't know why, my mother would take me along with her when she would deliver this food. And she would give me the box of food or the basket of food, and I would bring it up to the door and give it to these people. Some houses we'd come to and she'd say, don't knock on the door, just leave it on their porch. And I said, why? And she said, well, some people have a hard time feeling like they're getting help from other people. So we just leave it. We don't, so they can just find it there and we'll drive away. But on those trips to Molinar, I learned so much about human suffering. And my mother let me know more by example than by anything she said, even though I'm sure she said a lot, that we have an obligation, we have a responsibility to relieve some of the suffering in the world. And when I realized that I could take something as silly in some ways as magic and use it in a way to help people feel better about their lives, especially people who are in very difficult situations. My little student, who's 10 years old, I said, why do you like to do magic? He said, I love to make people happy. I love that my magic makes people happy. So I'm going to stop there for right now, but do you have something?
But I think it was very interesting that story about you and your mother and that suffering that you saw. Right?
Yeah.
I think that was very, very interesting.
I used to tell her when she was alive, I would not have started Magicians Without Borders without your example, and she was very happy. And I'm happy that I got to say that to her when she was alive. I'm sorry. I just needed to say.
But that's wonderful, because this is bringing back memories from me of how I remember all my Christmases. So that time in December, we as kids were always setting up to go and do either a performance or go and have fun with how should we put it, a temporary home that my grandfather on my mother's side set up with some of his friends. So they set up a building where they would house families, would not charge them rent for 2 or 3 years until they could save up so that they could have enough money to get a place of their own.
Wow.
And all my Christmases were spent there. So we would put on either a show for them, or we would get somebody to get a show for them, or we would take them to a park, or we would go and just be with them, and that's all the memories of my childhood Christmases are those. And so those are very, very happy memories that I have. And my family was always there for it's kind of a service to them, so being there for them in Christmas, and that's always been something in my mind. Seeing it, I had such a good time doing it. It felt so good. We had a good time. All of us had a great time. And I always wanted to keep on feeling that way, so keep on trying to replicate those feelings. And I guess that's part of why I do this, why we do this, what we do. And I wanted to answer the second part of the question, like what do you think, what do we think about this connection about magic and reality, and that reality being a lot of suffering in the world. And I see the connection in two ways. One is that it's a juxtaposition, right? We have all this suffering that it's unfair, unjust, that hurts us even though we're not feeling the pain. And we can also enjoy and feel awe and be amazed by magic, right? So we have these two things. And when we put them together, that's what I think we do, right? When we go and perform in these places that are very torn and very forgotten and in harsh situations, that juxtaposition kind of fades, right? And then we're all in a similar state. We are all enjoying. We're all laughing, right? As you've shared before, that story of a refugee saying this is the first time that we've laughed as a community, right?
Yeah.
So they start being very different, very far apart, but then they start coming together, then they mix, and then when we leave, they might start being together. But for that brief moment, I think magic has that ability of trying to soften out that suffering.
Yeah. I was thinking of that story that I've told many, many times about doing the performance for the folks who had survived the hurricane of Katrina. And before I went in there, and there were all these people lined up who had lost everything. And I just felt like doing magic for these people who are suffering so much isn't right somehow. It felt wrong at that moment. And yet I went in, and the people were indeed very sad and angry and silent and sitting there, having lost their homes, their work, their community, everything. And yet, and I just need to say this, it takes a certain courage on our part to go into a situation like that and do something that feels, like it may not feel right, but some part of me knew it was the right thing to do, even though I was feeling at that moment it was not. And it brought joy into that room, and people started laughing and talking, and I think maybe it relieved a little of their suffering or awakened their imagination that maybe they're going to get through this, and life is going to be okay on the other side. I don't know.
That's yeah. I think that's a challenge that we all have, and I've definitely felt that way also. And I guess, well, thanks, Andres, for that question. But that gives us a very, very good segue to this question. I'm gonna ask in two parts. So, it's it's a two-part question. One was asked by Abraham, who is also a student of ours in Costa Rica. Right? He asked us, "What keeps you motivated to keep on going with the project?" Right? And then I'm gonna add a question that my mom asked, and she said, in this 20 years, what have been some superlative experiences that have kept you motivated to persist in your mission and take this project to other countries?
Yeah.
So it's like a two-part question. Yeah. So, what keeps you motivated, Tom? What keeps you motivated on going? And maybe what have been those experiences that keep you motivated and, spreading this project all around?
I think we've been, talking about them, tonight. I think, seeing someone like Tammy, learn magic and finish high school and apply to a college and get into it and do really well. And that really motivates me and inspires me to want to share that with other kids. But I was thinking of another thing that inspires me. You don't have to go to a refugee camp, or you don't have to go to some place where people are really, really suffering. Like, in a slum or, someplace. You just have to go into a hospital, into a pediatric oncology ward, and go into a room, and there's a mother standing there beside her little child who has no hair, and they're obviously very, very weak from chemotherapy and radiation, and they're just there. And you come in and you do a little magic for that very weak, sick child. And I remember coming in and doing a bit of magic for this child, and the child smiled. And I looked up over the child's head, and there was the mom, and tears were running down her face. And I knew what she was feeling. And she told me afterwards, but at that moment I knew it. Her child hadn't smiled, in a number of weeks, and she was just so sick and so worn out. And her mom saw her child again, like come alive and smile. And that, to me, being able to do that and to make that mother so happy, motivates me.
Awesome, Tom. Great answer. Great answer. I love it. I was just thinking about the guy that asked this question. So Alal in Costa Rica, right?
Yeah.
So sorry, Abraham in Costa Rica. So, and I would say, if I had him here and he asked me that question, the answer would be you, right? Abraham, you keep me motivated. You are the motivation that I need, right? That we receive, because seeing Abraham, who is this charismatic performer, right? Who lights up when he's on stage, and it's very engaged with the audience, and right now he knows he has the power in him to change somebody's state in when he does a performance. That's a lot of motivation. Yeah. And seeing him perform in a whether it's in a big theater that we've done performances with him, or in a virtual environment that we did a couple of months ago with Abraham, I mean, that's the answer. He keeps me motivated, and our students keep me motivated. And stories like I remember Kimberly, the student of Mario in Aguachapan, El Salvador, how she feels so empowered about magic and being a woman magician in Ahuachapan, El Salvador, that there's no other women magicians in the country,
Yeah.
and having that acknowledgement. And that's a lot of motivation. I think that's, Abraham, thank you so much for your question. And,
Thank you. Thank you.
you're the one that keeps us motivated. So,
Yeah.
I think that to end this questions, I will add another question of um, about Abraham that I don't know the answer to it, but I really think that we should try and answer it a little bit. What new things have you planned for the project, Tom, for Magicians Without Borders?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah. Well, I think I wonder how this pandemic and how it's forced us, like the only traveling that I did this year was the trip to South Africa and then the trip to the border in El Paso, Juarez. And then we've been home and practically have not even left our house. So it's forced us to, inspired you, Carlos, to create these connections with companies and corporations and individuals and people who were celebrating occasions in their life to give these kids an opportunity to perform virtually and Zoom. And I wonder how much of that is going to continue, especially companies like Google that use computers so much and do so much over computers. I don't know. But what I'm thinking for myself is, and I get this answer, this question or comment a lot, is that we've traveled to all these countries, we've gone to all these other places. What about here at home? What about the poor communities in North America? What about, the Warrior Wizard program that Ryan Bart is going to be starting up soon, where we work with veterans and disabled veterans and training them to be magicians so they can perform in veterans hospitals and for events for veterans. I would really love to have more of those projects around the country. That's a couple of things that come to mind.
That's very good. I think it's very, very good that we can do this more locally. That's something that I would, love to do because, the performances locally also, I think are very, 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 put aside during this time. We can definitely work on that. And I do have something new that I think is pretty cool. We are actually working with some volunteers on developing like a skill, developing soft skills for our kids in a video format. So it's like a course that volunteers that are experts in something will be willing to share their knowledge with our students. So we're going to start that project for all of our kids in Colombia, El Salvador, and Costa Rica pretty soon. So that's going to be cool. So Abraham, you're going to be getting a proposal from us to help develop your soft skills beside magic. So some other skills, and that's something that we have definitely set up for later this year.
Here's a really, really big dream project of mine that there are 60 million refugees in the world today, and they estimate because of climate change by 2040 there'll be 250 million refugees driven out of their homes because of climate change. And what we're seeing in the United States are more and more severe storms like hurricanes and tornadoes and floods, and the amazingly sad forest fires, destructive forest fires in California. And we have a guest coming on in about 3 weeks who was affected by those fires. Someone who helped us in El Salvador for a number of years. So what I would like is some kind of magic response team, and maybe start thinking. I'll just describe how it might look in North America, that there would be like 150 magicians who would be available to, when there's a big forest fire like the Paradise Fire in California, the entire town was destroyed and people had to live in church basements, in gymnasiums and abandoned buildings, and they set up places. That we would have magicians who, when the time was right, a week or 2 weeks, 10 days after when people are settled into these centers, they would go there and they would perform like Janet and I did after Hurricane Katrina. And there would be magicians all over the United States, like the Red Cross. That's how the Red Cross works in the United States. If there's a big natural disaster, they call up the Red Cross volunteers and they say, can you go to Louisiana? And they go. So I would love to have a strike force of magicians that could respond to the amazing natural disasters that are going to be happening more and more, especially if we don't start changing in terms of in terms of climate change. That's a big one that Magicians Without Borders could help start.
I think that's a very, very great a vision. And I've put it on the comments. If you feel that you could be or would like to be part of that, what we're calling SOS Magic Strike Force, just sign up on the link. And we're starting to build up this dream. There's a lot of details we need to work out, but I think that is something that that is something that we're working towards, and we're going to be figuring out the details as we move on. But there's the link if you want to be part of this what we're calling SOS Magic Strike Force. That is going to be so useful during disasters or climate change disasters along the way. So thank you, Abraham, for that question. Thank you, Tom, for being here with me today and answering these questions on our very first mailbag episode. So remember, if you guys have more questions, please send them to podcast@magicianswithoutborders.com or tweet them at magicianswb, or send us a message in Facebook or Instagram. We would love to hear your questions, because we are doing this kind of episode on the last Wednesdays of each month. So on the next month, we'll be doing this on the last Wednesday, our mailbag episode. And well, before we go, just wanted to say, remember, if you have a celebration, a birthday that you would like to have magic at, you can hire us and our students, please go to store.magicianswithoutborders.com. There you can definitely hire us for a virtual show. We can have a virtual show at your house through the screen, or we can also have a workshop so that you can learn some magic. And also remember that we have this course called Become a Magician that you can buy for yourself or buy for someone else as a gift. These are 3 ways that you can help support us, and these are going to be, the profits from this are directly going to help our mission, and some of them you're going to be with our students. They're going to be performing and or teaching with you. So, Tom, this is it. It's been a blast. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
I'm glad our first mailbag session was so difficult. Those amazing questions. It was great. Made me really dig down and try to find answers. Thank you, all of you who sent those questions in.
Okay, everybody. Have a great week. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.